are welcoming today Rev Dr Tom Sannar. He has been a Science of Mind minister for many, many years and has a wonderful background to share with you. Dr. Tom, would you please share with us about your family and your siblings and how you found Science of Mind? Thank you.
Okay. Well, so I'm aging myself, but I was born in 1942 in Oakland, California. I spent most of my time being raised in Marin County, where I went to high school there. I went to University of California at Berkeley, graduated in 1965. Now, the interesting thing about Science of Mind is when I was 18 years old, I had what I suppose people would call a cosmic consciousness experience. It was totally out of the blue. And I had been touching on Eastern religions, even as early as that time. I knew that there was something more. My parents were raised in the Episcopal religion, and I studied to the best of my ability in my early 20s Christianity, and I knew that fundamental Christianity was not the correct answer for me, and I kept coming back all the time to that experiment. I would talk to different people, and based on what I knew at that time, at age 22 or 23 years old, I thought, I probably have to give up Western civilization and go meditate in a Zen monastery or something. That's how I saw it. So I didn't want to give up women or steak. So I kind of stopped my quest for a while. And then it's very interesting, you don't realize at the time when you marry. I was married at age 23. We've been married now for like 52 years. My wife's name is Gisela. And we didn't talk about religion at all when we first got married. But we realized within 5 or 6 years, we both loved to talk about ideas and philosophy. And we realized after 5 or 6 years that we were both on kind of a quest to find a spiritual answer, and neither of us knew exactly where to go at first. And so I had remembered when I was 18 years old, I had walked into a Christian Science church, and in the Christian Science church it said right on the wall, "God is love." And intuitively I knew that anybody who would put the word "God is love" on the wall had to have something going on. I knew that there was something there. So we actually together started our quest at Christian Science, and we were living in Woodland, California at the time, and we actually then went to Unity. And we met this delightful minister who had actually studied at Harvard Divinity School. Very, very bright guy. His name was Dr. Charles Slapp. And he gave these wonderful sermons, and he actually had them all printed out. You could take the sermon topic with you when you left. They were wonderful talks, pretty intellectual. So when we moved from Woodland, we moved down to Fresno, California, where I was hoping to start my law career. In fact, during this period of time, I had gone to law school. And so in Fresno, we went to the Unity Church because we thought we could continue to our quest, and they were on vacation. I found out that a lot of the Unity churches take the summer off. so, so that was kind of disappointing. So we went back to Christian Science for a couple of years, actually. And the only problem that I had, I mean, delightful people in Christian Science. We used to go to the Wednesday night testimony services. And I knew that the essence of the philosophy, they had something that spoke to my soul, but the problem that I kept encountering with Christian Science was the nature of physical reality, that their claim that the physical world was not real. And I remember getting up one night around midnight and stubbing my toe, going to the bathroom and saying, no, I have to be in a religion where where it's real. I mean, where the physical world is real. It just makes sense to me. So at any rate, so we decided to continue our quest, and there was a little religious science church down the street from our house in Fresno, and it had been and still is, by the way, a CSL center. It was a United Center at the time. So so we went there, and it was very interesting. And I think I told you this at one time, that when this is really interesting. When we got to that church that day, it had a guest speaker, and the guest speaker was Reginald Armour.
Huh.
And of course, I didn't know who Reginald Armour was. I had no idea. And he spoke on, the topic was Ernest Holmes as I knew him. And of course, we didn't know who Ernest Holmes was either. We had no knowledge. We're brand new. We had just come from the Christian Science, and we were trying to figure things out. And we liked it. But the only thing was, at the end of the talk, the minister said, turn to the person to the left of you and to the right of you and tell them that you love them. Well, as a newcomer, to the person to the left of me was my wife. I didn't have a problem. But the person to the right of me was this really good-looking woman. And I got embarrassed. And, you know, it's funny things with newcomers. And so I didn't go back to that center just because of that. We didn't go back there because I was embarrassed. So isn't that kind of, it's kind of crazy how, you know, even though you can like the message and everything else, an event can happen that can change the way you look at it. So that was in the I think it was in the summertime, and it was the fall of the same year, and I had met a person that told me about another religious science minister. I saw on her coffee table, she was a friend of mine, and on her coffee table was a book called The Handbook to Higher Consciousness by Ken Keyes. Back and then that was kind of a big book. And so I started to ask her about that, and she said, well, there's this new minister, he just came in with his kids and they're teaching a class. Why don't you stop by on Monday night and go to the class? And so that's what I did. And that was there were two religious science churches. That was the other religious science church. And his name was Reverend Don Ringness. You probably haven't run into him. Very interesting guy. He was a mystic. He was trained by Dr. Earl Barnum in Southern California. And I immediately related to him and everything he said. And I was actually practicing as an attorney at that time. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, what gives with this guy. And he stayed with me for 2 hours after the class and answered every question that I asked him. I came home that night and I told my wife, I said, we found it. She said, what do you mean? We found what? And I said, well, we found what we were looking for. I went to this class and I said, not only that, I said, I have made an appointment for you to go see the minister in a couple of days at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And she said to me, "You can't do that." And I said, well, I said, "We found it." But she said, "Well, you might have found something, but you can't just assume that I would go." Anyway, she did go. She went to the meeting with him. He got her on Meister Eckhart because, of course, my wife is German, and she knew Meister Eckhart, and she knew about him. And they meditated for 2 hours. And this is a true story. People say that in the room where they meditated that afternoon, you could smell like the scent of roses for the next 2 days. Did not leave the room. And I believe that. He was a very powerful guy. I don't need to go into a lot of the details, but he was really a wonderful influence on both Gisela, my wife, and I. We studied under him. We took all of our classes under him.
Repeat his name again.
Yeah, Don Ringnes, Ringnes.
Thank you.
There were some interesting things going on in his life. He wasn't as intellectually trained in the subject as he was experientially. He was very experiential. He would experience on things. He would go on fasts. He would do sensory deprivation. He would do a lot of these things. He personally, he was a disciple of Roy Eugene Davis. And of course, we studied under Roy Davis too. Both of us went to Roy Davis seminars. And the one thing that he did for me, and it maybe sounds kind of hokey if you haven't ever had the experience, but I was meditating with him one time, and he awakened the Kundalini, and I had never had that experience before. And the Kundalini is, in the Eastern tradition, is like it's like a coiled serpent is what the definition is, but it's like a light energy that's at the bottom of your spine, and in theory, in most people, it's not awakened. And so sometimes if you're with somebody who knows how to awaken it, the light actually shoots up your spine and goes directly to your brain. And it's actually an experience that you have. And so however he did it, I don't know, but it greatly affected me. I continued to study with him, but I had problems with some of the things that he did. He wasn't the best organized. He had the ability to attract pretty good group of people. He built the center up to about 200 people from about 15 or 20 when he got there. Trying to remember the woman who started that church. You probably know her. She was one of the very first, and then she moved to Arizona, and her name is slipping right now. I can't remember her name, but she's a really well-known person in the movement. What happened was he decided that he got disenchanted with the organization. He always had problems with the organization, and he would get upset with them. And so finally one day he said, I'm gonna go start my own movement. He always had these big dreams of starting his own movement. And I tried to by this time I knew him pretty well, because we were really, I guess, pretty close friends. We were probably the closest people in the congregation. You probably know, as ministers, it's difficult to be close to members of your congregation and confide in them. And one of the problems that ministers have is learning to finding people that you can really talk to about things that are going on in your life and stuff like that. Well, he did, but the bottom line was he moved to Florida. And when he moved to Florida, he told me, if you want to take over the center with Gisela, I'll support you to do that. In those days, in what was called the Religious Science International tradition, the local minister could train the ministers. There could be a minister training, and Gisela and I both had gone through that training by that time, and so we were valid. I mean, we were valid candidates, and so we took over the Fresno Church, and we started there in 1984 as the ministers, and we stayed there until I think 1992. In 1992, we went to, no, maybe it was 94, because I think we were there 10 years. But anyway, whatever it was, probably 94, yeah. In 94, we went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the minister there was a guy by the name of Vince Kiefner, who was a very interesting guy too. It's too bad you didn't get to know him. Very bright, he was trained by Kennedy Schultz. And by this time, of course, we were very well known in the Religious Science International movement. Gisela had served on the board of directors. I was serving on the their board of education. So we were deeply involved in Religious Science International. So we stayed in Milwaukee from 1994 until the end of 2001. In 2002, we came to Encinitas, mainly because I just wanted to get back to California. And so we were very fortunate coming back to Encinitas. Nancy Anderson, who had the Encinitas church, had resigned, and we took over the Encinitas church. It was a very small church at the time. And then we had an opportunity to take over the church that Harry Morgan Moses had down in San Diego. And we merged those two congregations, and we became One Heart, One Mind, Center for Spiritual Living. And of course, during this period of time, the movement continued with talks between United and RSI, and in 2012, they came together as one organization, and we were pretty intimately involved in the organizational process. Not as much as some, but we helped to bring that process together, and that happened actually happened in San Diego in 2012. So we stayed as the ministers of One Heart, One Mind, I think until the end of 2014, and at that time I retired, and Gisela retired too. And in the meantime, she was also working full-time at a job with hospice, which was important because the pay for the ministers, it was in San Diego County, and where we had to live and all of that. It was the minister's salary just wouldn't support all that. But we were very fortunate. We've done very well in San Diego. In the meantime, CSL wanted, I began to teach independent classes with Emerson Institute, and also CSL wanted me to teach classes, and I still teach classes for Centers for Spiritual Living, the Holmes Institute. I teach a class on Ernest Holmes and one on Thomas Troward. So I know it was a kind of a rambly answer, and but anyway, you got the background, so there it is.
Hey, well, that's great. During these many years, were you ever active with any of the interfaith groups or other religious organizations?
We tried a little bit, a couple of times, but the answer basically is no. What I found out about myself during this whole process, to be a minister of a church and an organization is, in a way, is kind of lonely, because the only people that you really come in contact with are members of your congregation, and it's very difficult. They have a very difficult time separating the role of the ministers from the person. And if you let your hair down as the person, members of your congregation kind of get confused. So, but actually, I found I'm a pretty loner person. I even outside of that, it's not, I don't make friends very easily. I mean, I'm friendly, I think, but I don't make friends very easily. My best friend is my wife. And I really prefer to kind of be by myself. So I tried a couple of those organizations. There was one I remembered was one called Process Theology. It was kind of interesting. And I was kind of intrigued by it, and I studied process theology to determine, how it fit with science of mind. There was a man by the name of Alan Anderson, and his wife's name was Deborah Whitehouse. You can still go on their website. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he had a sort of an alternative to traditional science of mind, basically claiming that there is no such thing as subject. Everything is in process. Everything is flowing, so that it all flows, and it also what happened in the past also affects everything that happens in the future, which is a little different than science of mind. So everything that goes on, and so when we do treatment, we have to be concerned about all the things that have gone on in the past. And that was one area that of course, science of mind says that principle is not bound by precedent, and you can start fresh, brand new each time. And that's one of the advantages, I think, of traditional science of mind.
What do you see as the future of science of mind and new thought in the world?
I don't know. I mean, I do have a very strong feeling, and I felt this when I retired back in 2014. I think that the Sunday experience and the idea of Sunday church is past its time. It's gone by the wayside. I think it's very, very difficult for people to go out and start their own congregations. That's an argument that, of course, you can sit down and discuss with lots of people. I personally think that the direction, and I will have to say as a caveat, I'm really not deep into what is happening. I'm on the education committee of CSL. I hear things come out of that committee sometimes. And I'm a traditionalist. I personally think that our organization is stronger when we focus on the fundamental ideas of Ernest Holmes and science of mind. And we get weaker when we try to water down our organization, or water down our religion and our philosophy. And especially, there are some people who, what they do is they take surveys and they try to figure out what people understand, and they want to change some of the language. I mean, I can give you just one quick example. Somebody wanted to change the word in the Declaration of Principles, wanted to change the word from emancipation to freedom. And and the other one they wanted to change was the word incarnation to individualization. And they just, some people went ahead and did it, and it came out in Science of Mind magazine. We still haven't traced back. We've been trying to trace back who made that decision and how it was made. We actually checked with David Goldberg, and we haven't been able to find that out. Things like that. Well, their argument was, well, people don't understand what incarnation means, and it's kind of a loaded word. But see, Ernest, that's the word Ernest Holmes meant, and incarnation means something specific in science of mind terminology.
Mhm.
So that's just an example of people trying to me, water down the teaching. I don't think it's successful, and I don't think it's going to be helpful. I think that you need the other problem is this whole idea of shared leadership, spiritual democracy, which is great in many ways, but we need. I mean, the reason Ernest Holmes was as successful as he was, is because he was the head of it.
Mhm.
And he was the person that you looked up to as the leader. And the problem is now you've got, too many different people making too many different interpretations, and most of them have not read Ernest Holmes. You know that one of my projects was to read everything that Ernest Holmes ever wrote and put it in a book, a searchable book, so people could take a look and find out everything. And I did that, and I also did it with Troward. So if you want to get a complete book on Troward, you have all the works of Troward plus all the interpretations, and you have the same thing with Holmes. So by reading both of those things, you get a really good idea
Mhm.
of science of mind. And a lot of our ministers haven't done that. They don't know Troward. They haven't taken the time to go in deeply into it, and they're teaching some of them. And again, I don't know enough about it to be that critical, but some of them are not teaching the deep principles of science of mind. And for that reason, I don't think we're growing.
In closing, what words of wisdom would you like to ensure are recorded as a legacy you leave the world?
That if you are willing to go deeply enough into the consciousness of Ernest Holmes, you'll find everything you're looking for, including a spiritual map to individualized liberation. It's all there, and you don't have to go outside of the teaching to some other source, but you have to dig in order to get it.
I thank you very much for your time, Dr. Sannar, and I know we really appreciate all that you continue to do in your teaching, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. It's been an absolute pleasure.